The role of women in the world wars. Women had to take on new roles in their respective countries' military efforts throughout both world wars. During this period, women faced both significant societal advancements and serious defeats worldwide. The outcome of both world wars depended as much on industrial output as it did on combat engagements. Women were supposed to be mostly engaged in duties at home and women's work, especially after the conflicts were done, even though a few of them were able to pursue historically masculine career routes. However, women were also victims of the two wars, suffering from innumerable incidents of sexual violence, abuse, and even death. Women's involvement in the world wars paved the way for their later enlistment in the armed forces of numerous nations. Women's dedication to helping their country, upholding national security, and maintaining national identity was demonstrated by their participation in various wartime endeavors. Let's explore the role of women in the world wars. First World War. Europe. Before the Great War, there were 24 million adult women in Great Britain. Of these, 1.7 million were employed in domestic service, 200,000 in the textile industry, 600,000 in the clothing trades, 500,000 in commerce, and 260,000 in local and federal government, including education. Particularly in Britain, the textile and apparel industries employed significantly more women than males and were thought to be women's work. Approximately 5.09 million of the 23.8 million women in Britain were employed by 1914. Thousands of people built aircraft in huge hangars, offices, and weapons factories. In addition to other volunteer labor, women knitted socks for the soldiers serving on the front lines. However, to support their families, women had to work for pay. Many women created victory gardens, promoted the sale of war bonds, and volunteered at the Red Cross. Women in Britain were allowed to work on assembly lines during World War I. This was referred to as a dilution process in Great Britain, and the trade unions, especially those in the engineering shipbuilding sectors, strongly opposed it. Throughout the two world wars, women did occasionally perform expert men's work. However, as a result of the deal reached with the trade unions, women who worked on projects covered by the dilution agreement were laid off at the end of World War I. Americas. The United States' triumph in World War I was greatly aided by the participation of women. The jobs that the men left behind to fight in a war were filled by them. Women did not engage in direct battle. Instead, they made contributions through fundraising, domestic work, and maintaining the nation's infrastructure. The success of America's military effort might have depended on the contributions of women because tens of thousands of men who were needed at the front would have been forced to work in industry, agriculture, and the home front military and would not have been available for deployment during a war. In the United States, all housewives were required to sign a pledge card with fulfilled chores and meals. Even before the United States formally entered the war in April 1917, thousands of women in the country founded and or joined groups that sought to provide aid to the war-torn nations of Europe. All people, irrespective of their social status, made contributions to the war effort. Due in large part to their ability to allocate a significant amount of time and resources to these endeavors, women from higher social classes were the principal founders and participants in volunteer organizations throughout the war. Although they were more likely to work as nurses in the armed forces or take over men's jobs at home while the men were at war, middle-class and lower-class women also took part in these groups and efforts. Women from all socioeconomic classes were participating in the war effort in some manner for the first time in American history. Asia. During World War I, thousands of people traveled from Asia to Europe to help with the war effort in Great Britain. 92,000 of these people were war workers from China alone. Families at home were split apart as a result of the European nations' reliance on a male labor force to win the war. Japan's silk and cotton industries saw rapid growth in the years preceding World War I. When World War I was almost over 80% of Japanese women citizens were employed in these textile enterprises. Their living conditions in filthy dorms combined with starvation and major illnesses like tuberculosis made for appalling working conditions for the female employees. Canada. During the First World War, more than 2,800 women enlisted in the Royal Canadian Army Medical Corps, marking the beginning of Canadian women's involvement in the armed forces beyond nursing. In case they were required as home guards, women received paramilitary training in drill, small guns, first aid, and vehicle maintenance. 43 female soldiers from Canada lost their lives in World War I. Second World War. The U.S. 6 million more women entered labor during World War II, which had a significant cultural impact. Women had to take on the obligations that the males had to abandon since they were fighting in the wars. Throughout World War II, women played a variety of responsibilities depending on the nation. Due to the enormous scope of the worldwide battle during World War II and the pressing need to mobilize the entire population, women's roles were bound to expand. The character Rosie the Riveter came to represent women's commitment to conventional masculine labor. Women's contributions to paid and volunteer work during World War II were much greater than those during the First World War due to their increased confidence, opportunity, and skill set. Over 2.2 million women were employed in the military industry by 1945, primarily in munitions factories. They took part in the construction of vehicles, aircraft, ships, and weapons. Along with working on farms and driving trucks, women also supported soldiers logistically and entered previously male-dominated fields of work in the workforce. Thousands of women joined frontline nursing units in the Allied countries. Historian Dan Campbell states that 140,000 women serve in the Army and Navy Nurse Corps (ANC), 100,000 in the Waves, 23,000 in the Marines, 13,000 in the Sparrows, and 74,000 in the WACs between 1942 and 1945. The Women's Military Services Integration Act of 1948 marked the official admission of women as a permanent component of the American military forces following the war. Europe. Several hundred thousand women participated in combat operations in European nations, particularly in anti-aircraft forces. Numerous women had positions in important government agencies like the OSS. The primary purposes of these missions were counterintelligence and spying. As an example, consider Operation Sauerkraut, in which women were employed in Allied prisoner of war camps to turn German and Czech prisoners into Allied propaganda tools before they were transferred back across the border and into Germany. Approximately 12% of all resistance fighters were women, and women were employed extensively in a variety of capacities during and the French resistance against Nazi persecution. Many gender norms and expectations were abandoned to accommodate the French forces of the interior's new demands for resistance fighters as they realized how important it was to use women throughout the war. Then these women started to perform the same tasks and responsibilities as French men, including guiding Allied forces, keeping an eye out for German activities, and even assisting in the extermination of any last Germans from towns and areas that the Allies had seized or controlled. Asia. The Imperial Japanese Army coerced women known as comfort women into sexual servitude both before and during World War I. Put another way, the comfort women were a component of Japan's systematic rape campaign, particularly among its armed soldiers during World War II. Particularly utilized were Korean ladies. To have sex with them, the Japanese Imperial Army stationed these ladies in comfort stations close to the front lines. The comfort women, who ranged in age from 11 to 20, were taken from their families and forced to work for the Japanese Army. A high-ranking Japanese military official named Okamura Yasuji learned in March 1932 that there had been multiple rapes in Shanghai by Japanese soldiers. Senior Japanese military official Okabunao Saburo was given orders to establish comfort stations by Okamura Yasuji, who believed this would help stop Japanese soldiers from raping villagers. Australia. Compared to the First World War, when they mostly served as nurses and other homefront workers, Australian women had a bigger role during World War II. By 1940, there were hundreds of volunteer women's auxiliary and paramilitary organizations in existence because many women wished to be actively involved in the war. In 1941 and 1942, the military had to create female branches because of a lack of male recruits. Despite taking on roles that were previously only held by men, women were nevertheless paid less. In conclusion, women's responsibilities were greatly enlarged by the world wars as they filled positions that had previously been filled by men and made vital contributions to the war effort. Their contributions during the war created the foundation for later developments in gender equality and military engagement, even though they later returned to traditional positions. If you found this content helpful, be sure to like the video, subscribe for more insightful videos and updates, and don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you may have. We'd love to hear from you.